My name is Ethan Calloway, and I made a promise to God that if I was given breath again, I would not stay silent. There are things I was shown that do not belong to this world, things I have tried and failed to forget. But I cannot carry this alone anymore. So listen to me carefully. Because what I am about to say is not a story. It is a confession. I died, not in a dream, not in some distant imagination. I died, and I stood in a place where every prayer I had ever spoken was laid bare before eternity. And what I saw there, what He showed me, it broke something inside of me that has never healed. Because I realized most of the prayers we speak never reach Him. Not because He is silent, but because we are not truly calling. Even now I hesitate to say this out loud. And because once you hear it, once you understand, there is no going back to the way you used to pray. There is no going back to pretending. Keep speaking. That's what I heard in the darkness between life and whatever comes after, not as a suggestion, but as a command. So I am speaking now, even though my voice feels too small, even though my heart still trembles from what I saw. Because the truth must be told. The truth must be told. What I was shown, what was revealed to me beyond the veil, it will change the way you see God. It will change the way you pray, and if you let it, it will change the way you live. I did not ask to see this, but I made a vow, and I intend to keep it. Before all of this, before the silence broke me open, my life looked like something you would recognize. There was nothing extraordinary about it. I woke up early, but not because I was seeking anything sacred. Just the pull of routine, the quiet obligation of another day, the sound of an alarm, the dim light slipping through the edges of the curtains. Coffee brewing untouched for too long as my mind wandered somewhere I could never quite name. I moved through my mornings like a man rehearsing a life he no longer questioned. Same streets, same turns, same thoughts repeating themselves like a loop that refused to end. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I still prayed. But not the way I once did. Not like when I was younger, when my words carried wonder, when my voice trembled with belief. No, these prayers were different. Short, careful, predictable, almost memorized. I would bow my head, close my eyes, say the right things, and then move on. As if God was something to check in with instead of someone to surrender to. And yet I kept asking, for direction, for peace, for clarity, for something, anything to break the quiet weight I carried inside. But nothing came, or at least nothing I could recognize. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. And my prayers began to feel like they were dissolving before they ever left my lips. Like they were falling instead of rising. And I remember the exact feeling. Standing alone one night, hands slightly raised, unsure of why I was still trying, and asking, not with my voice, but with something deeper, why does it feel like you're not listening? That question stayed with me. It followed me into my mornings, sat beside me in my silence, echoed in the spaces between my thoughts. I didn't stop believing. But something in me was drifting, not away from God, but away from truth. I didn't know it then. I didn't have the language for it. But there was a distance growing between what I was saying and what I was living, between my words and my heart. And the more I ignored it, the quieter everything became. My prayers were still there, but they felt empty. Not because God had gone silent, but because something inside of me had. There are moments, looking back now, when I realize I was being warned. Not loudly, not forcefully, but gently. Like something was trying to wake me up before it was too late. You were brought here to remember. I didn't understand those words then. I thought remembering meant holding on to belief. But I was wrong. Remembering was something much deeper, something I had already begun to forget. I didn't know that the last normal moment of my life had already passed. It didn't arrive with warning. No voice, no sign, no thunder in the distance. Just a moment that split everything in two. I remember where I was, standing still, but not really present. My body there, my thoughts somewhere else. And then it happened. A sharp pressure deep in my chest. Not just pain, but something heavier, like my body was folding inward on itself. My breath caught. I tried to steady myself, but my hands didn't feel like mine anymore. The room shifted. Not spinning, not collapsing, just loosening its grip on reality. And suddenly, sound began to fade. Not all at once, but slowly, like the world was being pulled away from me. Every noise, every movement stretching, thinning, dissolving. Time didn't stop. It slowed. Each second expanding, becoming something I could feel. My heartbeat, loud at first, pounding urgent, and then weakening. Fading, like a drum disappearing into the distance. Panic rose in me, raw, instinctive. I tried to hold on, tried to breathe deeper, tried to stay present, tried to resist whatever was happening. But there was nothing to grab, nothing to fight. And then something shifted. Not outside of me, inside. The panic began to loosen. Not because I understood what was happening, but because something greater than fear began to take its place. A stillness, unfamiliar, but undeniable. My body felt heavy, but I did not. And then I was no longer inside it. There is no other way to say it. I was above, looking down. Seeing myself lying there still disconnected from the life I had been trying so hard to hold together. It should have terrified me, but it didn't, because the fear had already left. What remained was something I had never felt before. Clarity, not of thought, but of being, as if everything unnecessary had been stripped away, and all that was left was awareness. He called my name in the dark, not in words, but in knowing. And then I saw it, not in front of me, not behind me, but beyond me. A light, but not like anything I had ever seen. It wasn't distant. It wasn't blinding. It was drawing me, calling without force. And I understood without being told this was where I was meant to go. There was no hesitation, no resistance. The world I had known, the body I had lived in, the life I thought I was holding together, all of it began to feel smaller, further away, like something I had already stepped out of. And as I moved, or was pulled, toward that light, there was a moment, a single, sacred moment, where everything went completely still. No sound, no movement, no thought, only presence. And in that silence I felt it again. That same truth, that same whisper, that same calling I had ignored when I was alive. You were brought here to remember. But this time I couldn't ignore it, because there was nothing left to hide behind. The distance was gone. The noise was gone. And for the first time I wasn't speaking anymore. I was listening. And the deeper I went, the more I understood. This was not the end. This was the beginning of something I was never prepared to see. Keep speaking. And even now, as I relive this moment with you, I still feel it. That crossing. That surrender. That moment when everything I thought I knew fell away, and something eternal began to unfold. And then I crossed. There is no line you can see, no gate, no threshold marked by stone or sound, but something in me knew. I was no longer between worlds. I had entered something eternal. The light that once felt distant was now everywhere. Not surrounding me, but within everything. It was not empty brightness. It was alive. Moving, breathing, as if light itself carried awareness. It did not blind me. It revealed me. He called my name in the dark. And now there was no darkness left. Only knowing. Only presence. The atmosphere, if I can even call it that, was unlike anything the human body is built to understand. There was no weight, no pressure, no urgency, only stillness. But not the kind of stillness we fear, not silence as absence, but silence as fullness. Every part of it carried peace. Not a fragile peace, not something that could be broken, but something whole, complete, unshakable. And as I moved deeper, I began to feel something I had never truly felt on earth. I was known, completely. Not just my actions, not just my words, but every hidden place within me. Every thought I buried, every motive I disguised, every quiet longing I never spoke aloud. All of it seen. And yet, I was not rejected. There was no shame here, no need to hide, because in that place truth did not condemn. It uncovered. And somehow being fully seen felt like being fully loved. There were others. Not in the way we recognize people, not defined by faces or names, but present, aware, connected. Some felt familiar, as if I had known them long before I ever lived. Others felt ancient, like they carried something older than time itself. They did not speak. PC, but their presence was enough. Everything communicated without words. Everything understood without effort. And I realized something then, something that shook me in a way no fear ever had. On earth, we are surrounded by noise, constant sound, constant movement, constant distraction. But here there was none of that. No chaos, no confusion, no need to strive or prove. And in the absence of all that noise, truth became unmistakable. There was nothing to hide behind. No performance, no pretending, only what is. Return to the fire. I didn't know why that thought came to me then, but it settled deep, like something I was beginning to remember, but had not yet fully understood. And the deeper I went, the more I felt it. That this place was not just peace. It was preparation. Everything around me, every movement of light, every silent presence was leading to something. Someone. I could feel it. Not as anticipation, but as certainty. Like standing on the edge of a moment that would define everything that came before it. And then the light began to change. Not dimming, but focusing, gathering, drawing my awareness toward a single point, a presence greater than everything I had already seen. And suddenly, that peace I felt deepened, not into fear, but into reverence. The kind that quiets everything inside you, not because you are forced to be still, but because you know you are about to encounter something holy. He called my name in the dark, and now I was about to see who had been calling me all along. Keep speaking. And I will. Because what came next is the reason I was brought there at all. And then everything became still in a way I had never known before. Not just the space around me, but within me. Every thought quieted, every memory paused, every trace of self laid down, because he was there. I did not see him arrive. There was no movement, no transition. Only the sudden, undeniable awareness that I was no longer alone. And I knew, not by sight, not by sound, but by recognition that reached deeper than anything I had ever called knowing. This was him, the one I had spoken to without listening, the one I had called on without understanding, the one I had tried to reach while remaining distant. He called my name in the dark, and now I stood in the light of the one who had been calling me all along. There was no fear, not the kind I expected. No trembling from threat, no instinct to hide because there was nowhere to hide. And not in that place, not before him. Everything in me was already seen. And yet I was not met with rejection. I was met with something far more overwhelming. Understanding, complete, unfiltered, undeniable understanding. And in that understanding, my life began to unfold. Not as memories I chose to recall, but as truth I could no longer avoid. I saw everything. Not just what I had done, but why I had done it. Every word I had spoken, every silence I had justified, every moment I had chosen comfort over truth laid bare. But what shook me most was not my actions, it was my intentions. The quiet places in my heart, the hidden motives behind my prayers, the parts of me I never allowed anyone to see, not even myself. And there it was. Nothing missing, nothing softened, nothing hidden. I saw my prayers, every single one, not as I remembered them, but as they truly were. Some rose clear aligned, carried by something deeper than words, but others, they faltered, not because they were unheard, but because they were divided. Words reaching upward while my heart remained anchored somewhere else. Asking, but not surrendering. Speaking, but not listening. And in that moment, I understood something I had never allowed myself to face. God had never been distant. I had been divided. There was no voice in the way we understand voices, and yet everything was being spoken. Not into my ears, but into my being. Truth without distortion. Clarity without resistance. And I felt it. Not as a sentence, but as something that settled into me like fire. I was brought here for a reason. Not by accident, not by chance, but with intention. Every moment of my life, every prayer, every silence had led to this. This encounter, this unveiling, return to the fire. And I realized then this was not punishment. This was not condemnation. This was invitation, a calling back to something I had drifted from without even knowing it. And standing there, fully seen, fully known, I felt something rise within me, not fear, but grief. Not because I was rejected, but because I finally saw how much I had held back. How much of myself had never truly reached him. He called my name in the dark, and I had answered with half of my heart. But even in that realization, even in that weight of truth, there was something else. Something deeper. A love that did not withdraw. A presence that did not turn away. And I understood this moment was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of truth. Keep speaking, and I will. Because what he showed me next is why I was brought there at all. And then he showed me. Not in fragments, not in symbols I had to struggle to understand, but in a clarity so pure it left no room for denial. I saw prayers, not one, not a few, but countless. Rising from the earth like breath on a cold morning, lifting, reaching, stretching towards something eternal. They came from everywhere, from quiet bedrooms and crowded cities, from whispered desperation and rehearsed devotion, from people on their knees, and people barely paying attention to the words they spoke. All of them rising, all of them searching for him. And for a moment I felt hope, because there were so many reaching, so many calling. But then I saw what happens next. Some of those prayers they continued. They moved upward, steady, clear, carried by something deeper than sound. They did not struggle. They did not scatter. They aligned, and they reached him. Not because they were louder, not because they were more polished, but because they were true. He called my name in the dark, and now I was seeing who truly answered. But then, the others, the ones that broke me. I watched as so many prayers began to falter. Not violently, not dramatically, but quietly, like something within them was missing. They rose, but only halfway. They stretched, but could not sustain. And then they dissolved. Not rejected, not pushed away. Just unable to continue. As if they had nothing to carry them the rest of the way. And I understood. Not all at once, but in layers that unfolded inside me like truth I had always avoided. It was not that God was ignoring them. It was that they were divided. Words were being spoken, but the life behind those words was moving in another direction. I saw prayers formed in fear but rooted in control. Prayers spoken in desperation but unwilling to surrender. I saw people asking for guidance while resisting change, calling for truth while clinging to what was comfortable. And in that tension, those prayers could not rise, because they were not whole. Return to the fire, I saw ritual, endless repetition, perfectly formed sentences, familiar rhythms spoken without presence, words learned but not lived. And those prayers, they carried no weight. Not because the words were wrong, but because the heart behind them was absent. And then I saw something even deeper. People asking without ever listening, filling the silence with requests, but never waiting long enough to hear what had already been given. Speaking to God, but never being still enough to be with Him. And I realized how often I had done the same. How many times I had called His name while holding back the very thing He was asking for. Not my words, not my effort, but my surrender. And then He showed me the difference. A small number, not many, not the loudest, not the most visible, but unmistakable. Their prayers were different. They did not rush. They did not perform. They did not hide. Their words and their lives were the same, aligned, whole. When they spoke, they meant it. When they asked, they were already yielding. When they waited, they trusted. And their prayers did not struggle. They moved like light, clear, direct, unhindered. Nothing in them contradicted the truth they carried. Nothing in them resisted the one they were reaching for. They were chosen. Not because they were perfect, but because they were true. Because they had allowed themselves to be changed before asking for change. Because they had surrendered before asking to receive. The truth must be told. And I felt it then, the weight of what I was being shown. This was not information. This was revelation. Not something to observe, but something that demanded response. Because I could no longer say, I didn't know. I could no longer pretend that all prayers were the same. I had seen the difference. I had felt the divide. He called my name in the dark, and I finally understood He had never stopped listening. It was I who had not yet learned how to truly call. Return to the fire. Because that is where prayer becomes real. Not in words alone, but in a life that no longer resists the truth it speaks. And just when the weight of that truth began to settle into me, the vision shifted. Not away from what I had seen, but forward. As if I was being shown not only what is, but what is coming. I saw the earth again. But it didn't look the same. Not because the buildings had changed, not because the systems had fallen, but because something deeper was beginning to awaken. It didn't start with crowds. It started quietly. One person, then another, then another. In different places, different lives, different stories, but the same moment, the same breaking. I saw people stop mid-prayer as if something inside them finally refused to continue pretending. Words falling away, silence taking their place. Not empty silence, but honest silence. The kind that strips everything down to truth. He called my name in the dark, and now they were beginning to hear it too. I saw people fall to their knees, not out of habit, not out of performance, but because something in them could no longer stand in the presence of truth. Masks began to drop. Carefully constructed versions of themselves no longer sustainable, no longer convincing. I saw men who had hidden behind strength begin to break. Women who had carried silent burdens finally release them. People who had spoken confidently suddenly fall quiet, not in fear, but in surrender. Return to the fire. And they did. Not all at once, but one by one, choosing honesty over image, choosing surrender over control, choosing truth over comfort. And as they did, something began to change. Their prayers were no longer weak. no longer divided, no longer empty. They carried weight, not because they were louder, but because they were real. And I saw it like light spreading across a darkened horizon, not forced, not manufactured, but inevitable. Each surrendered heart becoming a point of light. And those lights began to connect, or not through systems, not through movements, but through truth. A quiet awakening that could not be contained. The world must be shaken before it can be restored. And I saw the shaking, not just in the world around them, but within them. Everything false, everything misaligned, everything built on appearance beginning to crumble. Not to destroy them, but to free them. To strip away what could not stand so something real could finally rise. And in that rising, their prayers changed everything. Not instantly, not visibly at first, but deeply. Roots shifting beneath the surface where no one could see. I saw broken families begin to heal not through force, but through humility. I saw people step away from noise and into stillness. I saw hearts that had been hardened soften. And for the first time, their prayers were not reaching upward alone, they were transforming everything around them. Because they were no longer divided. They were chosen. Not set apart by status, but by surrender. Not elevated above others, but aligned with truth. And I understood then this awakening was not coming from the outside. It was beginning within. Within hearts that chose to stop pretending. Within lives that chose to align. Within souls that chose to finally return. But even as I watched this, even as hope began to rise within me, I felt something else. A knowing that not everyone would choose this. That some would resist the shaking cling to what was familiar, hold on to the illusion of control. And that tension would define what comes next. He called my name in the dark. And now he is calling again. Not just to me, but to anyone willing to hear. Return to the fire, because that is where the awakening begins. And then I was pulled back. Not gently, not gradually, but suddenly, like being torn from something sacred and forced back into something heavy. The light, gone. The stillness, broken. And in its place noise, sharp, immediate, overwhelming. My body, I felt it again. But it didn't feel like home. It felt foreign, dense, restrictive, like being poured back into something too small to hold what I had just experienced. My chest burned. My lungs struggled. Air rushed in, but it felt unnatural, forced, like I had forgotten how to breathe. Everything hurt. Not just physically, but deeper than that. As if my soul itself was grieving the return. I opened my eyes. But the world looked different. The same shapes, the same people, the same space. And yet, everything felt dimmer, heavier, like I had stepped out of something eternal and back into something temporary, something fragile. He called my name in the dark, and now the world felt loud again, too loud, too full of things that no longer made sense. Time passed. I don't know how much. Moments blurred into hours into something I could barely track. But one thing remained clear. I was not the same. I couldn't be. Not after what I had seen. Not after what I had been shown. And so, I tried to speak. Not all at once. Not everything. Just pieces. Fragments of what had happened. Carefully. Cautiously. As if saying it too loudly might break something. But the responses, they were not what I expected. Some looked at me with polite confusion. Nods that carried no understanding. Others dismissed it. Only a reaction I could feel before it was even spoken. A quiet disbelief. As if what I had experienced was something to be explained away, reduced, contained. And some, they didn't even engage at all. Just silence. Indifference. As if what I carried was too heavy for them to even consider. And I realized something then: not everyone is ready to hear truth even when it is spoken with sincerity. Not everyone wants to be shaken. Because to be shaken means something must fall. Something must change. Keep speaking. That voice, it didn't leave me. Not in the light, not in the return. It followed me through the noise, through the doubt, through the resistance. And even when I questioned myself, even when I wondered if I should stay silent, it remained. Steady, unyielding, keep speaking. But it wasn't just external resistance. It was internal. Then there were moments when the weight of what I carried felt too much. Moments when I wanted to return to the simplicity of before, to routine, to distraction, to not knowing. Because knowing changes everything. It removes the comfort of ignorance. It replaces it with responsibility. And I felt that responsibility pressing against me, not as a burden, but as a calling I could not escape. Return to the fire. Because once you've seen truth, you cannot unsee it. Once you've been called, you cannot pretend you didn't hear it. And so I remained, in a world that felt different, among people who could not see what I had seen, carrying something invisible but undeniable, a knowing, a fire, a truth that refused to fade. He called my name in the dark, and now I must answer in the light, no matter the cost. Keep speaking, and now I need you to listen. Or not casually, not the way we listen while thinking about something else, but deeply. Because this is the part that is not just about me anymore. It's about you. I have seen what happens to prayers. I have seen the difference between words and truth. And I cannot leave you with this without telling you plainly. There is a distance growing between what people say to God and how they actually live. And that distance is where prayers begin to lose their strength. Not because God has turned away, but because we have not fully turned toward Him. He called my name in the dark. And I almost missed it because I was too used to speaking instead of surrendering. There is a quiet danger in spiritual routine. In saying the right words at the right times with the right posture while your heart remains untouched. It feels safe. It feels familiar. But it creates something invisible, a separation. A life that says one thing and a soul that lives another. And I'm telling you this because I lived there. I know what it feels like to believe you are reaching God while holding back the very thing He is asking for. Return to the fire. Because prayer, real prayer, is not about saying more. It is about becoming aligned. It is about surrender. It is about allowing your life to match the truth you are speaking. So I need you to ask yourself, not quickly, not defensively, but honestly, are your prayers whole? Or are they divided? Are you asking while resisting? Speaking without listening? Calling without truly yielding? Because I have seen it. I have seen what happens when a prayer is real. And I have seen what happens when it is not. And once you know that difference, you cannot unknow it. You're not here by accident. You did not just stumble into this moment. You were brought here for a reason. Not to be entertained. Not to collect another story, but to remember, to realign, to return. Return to the fire. And if something inside you, even something small, is stirring right now, don't ignore it. That stirring is where truth begins. This is not the end of something. It is the beginning. A journey that will ask more of you than you are comfortable giving. But it will also give you something this world cannot. Truth, clarity, real connection. If you are ready for that, if you are willing to walk that path, then stay with me. Continue this journey here on Minutes Beyond Life. Not as a viewer, but as someone who is ready to seek what is real. Because what is coming, what is unfolding, will not leave anyone unchanged. The time is now. I to choose. There is something I have not been able to forget. Not the light, not the presence, not even the weight of what I was shown, but the silence. That silence before he revealed everything. The kind of silence that does not empty you, but exposes you. The kind where there are no more words to hide behind, no more prayers to perform, no more distance to maintain. Only truth. I think about that silence often. In the quiet moments when the world slows down just enough, and I can feel it again, that same stillness waiting. Not for more words, but for something real. He called my name in the dark, and I wonder how many are still speaking without ever truly hearing that call. How many are filling the silence because they are afraid of what it might reveal. This is not just my story. It never was. It is a mirror, a moment, an invitation. Because one day, whether we are ready or not, we will all stand in that same stillness, where everything we said and everything we lived will no longer be separate, where every prayer will be seen for what it truly was, whole or divided. And in that moment, there will be no performance, no rehearsed words, no pretending, only what is real. Return to the fire, because that is where truth begins, not in comfort, not in routine, but in surrender, in letting go of what is false so something eternal can take its place. I have carried this so that you would not have to walk blindly, so that when that silence comes, you are not meeting it for the first time. You were brought here to remember, not religion, not routine, but truth, the kind that calls you out of hiding and into something real. Return not to noise, not to empty repetition, but to what was always there, to the words that still breathe, to the life that still calls. Return to the Gospels. Return to Christ, not as an idea, but as truth you are willing to live, because the cost is everything, everything you pretend to be, everything you hide behind, everything you are afraid to release. But what waits on the other side of that surrender is something this world cannot give and cannot take away. I cannot make that choice for you. No one can. He called my name in the dark, and now he is calling yours. The time is now. Choose